Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. No, I didn't kill her, Will exclaimed, his voice cracking like dry timber beneath the strain of despair. The remarks echoed off the decaying walls of his apartment, but they did little to ease the policeman's emotions. They had heard similar appeals before, perhaps too many times, and Will's laments were only another lyric in a song they knew by heart. He pushed against their grip not out of rebellion, but out of a basic desire to be heard, to convince them that Luna, his Luna, was the light he would never extinguish. Across town in a dimly lit tavern smelling of booze and regret, Bill sat huddled in a corner booth, tears flowing down his aged face. The television over the bar showed a news story, the anchor's voice a low hum behind Bill's weeping. The ticker read, "Will say I don't kill Luna," and the words burned into his head like a brand. Bill's hands trembled as he gripped a crumpled snapshot of Luna, her grin glowing even through the fading Polaroid. She had been his daughter, his pride, and the only thing in his life that felt pure. Now she was gone, and everyone was throwing the finger at Will, the guy she had loved. The story of Luna's death had unraveled the small hamlet of Crestwood like a loose thread from a sweater. It started with murmurs, quiet and insidious, and escalated into a cacophony of accusations. Luna had been discovered in the woods, her body curled beneath an oak tree, her vivid spirit extinguished like a candle in a storm. The police had no definitive answers, only a trail of clues leading to Will's door. A neighbor had noticed him quarrel with Luna the night before, their voices cutting through the thin walls of their apartment building. A petrol station clerk reported Will purchasing a bottle of bleach at an unusual hour. The knife, found in a dumpster behind his building, had traces of Luna's blood on the blade. Will's thoughts raced as the police car rushed through the rain-soaked streets, the red and blue lights illuminating the night in gaudy colors. He repeated his last moments with Luna, looking for a clue, an explanation, or anything to explain why the universe had turned against him. They had battled, undoubtedly, but it was a conflict born of love strained by circumstance, bills piling up, aspirations postponed, and the daily grind of existence grinding them down. Luna had intended to leave Crestwood to pursue a larger life than they could afford. Will had resisted, not because he didn't believe in her, but because he was afraid of losing the only thing that had ever kept him stable. Their comments were sharp, but they parted with a kiss and a promise to talk in the morning. That morning never arrived. Bill's tears in the bar smudged the margins of Luna's face on the photograph. He never truly trusted Will. Something about the boy, his calm intensity, the way his eyes appeared to carry secrets, had always bothered Bill. Luna had dismissed her father's fears as overprotective, but Bill couldn't shake the sensation that Will's love for her was too intense, too consuming. With Luna gone, Bill's uncertainties had become into conviction. He wasn't sure whether Will had killed her, not in the sense the police appeared to assume, but he had a feeling Will was involved in her death, a shade cast over her brightness. The probe spread like a sluggish poison, affecting every area of Crestwood. The police quizzed Will for hours, their questioning hammering at the frail foundation of his lie. Where were you from midnight to 3 a.m.? Why was your phone turned off? What did you do with that knife? Will's responses were constant, but lacked the specificity that the cops sought. After Luna went, he was alone at home. His phone had died and he had not bothered to charge it. What about the knife? He knew nothing about knives. But, as Will discovered, the truth was a feeble defense against suspicion. Meanwhile, the town turned against itself. Neighbors who had formerly enjoyed coffee and gossip now looked at each other with suspicion. The local diner, once a source of comfort, has become a battleground for whispered theories and pointed fingers. Some suspected Will was responsible, a guy driven to violence by jealousy or desperation. Others assumed Luna's killing was the product of a stranger, a transient passing through Crestwood's peaceful streets. A few quieter voices thought Luna may have committed herself, unable to bear the weight of a world that felt too small for her dreams. But no one could connect that concept with the Luna they knew, the girl who lit up rooms, sang off-key in the shower, and aspired to paint the globe with her art. Bill, unable to sit quietly in his anguish, launched his own investigation. He drove to the woods where Luna had been discovered, the oak tree now a temple to wilting flowers and scrawled notes. He stood there, the rain soaking through his coat, attempting to envisage his daughter's final moments. Had she felt scared? Has she fought? Had she shouted out for her father, the man who was supposed to protect her? The questions gnawed at him like fresh wounds. He spoke with Luna's friends, her co-workers at the art gallery, and anyone else who had seen her in the days leading up to her death. What he discovered was a portrayal of a woman torn between two worlds. Her love for Will tugging her one way, and her ambition pulling her the other. Will, meantime, was drowning in his own misery. The police had freed him because there was insufficient evidence to hold him, but the town had already found him guilty. He couldn't walk to the corner store without feeling like he was being watched and hearing whispers like shadows. His position at the hardware business was terminated, citing community concerns. His few remaining pals stopped responding his calls. Even his mother, who lived 2 towns away, appeared to pause when he talked, as if she too questioned whether her son was capable of such an act. Will spent his days in his apartment, the walls closing in, repeating every moment with Luna, looking for the point where it all went wrong. Will was unable to sleep one night and ended up at an oak tree in the woods. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. He knelt before the makeshift shrine, his fingertips tracing the margins of a letter that said, "You were our light, Luna." He had no idea why he had come. All he knew was that he needed to feel close to her, to locate some bit of her that the world had not taken away. As he sat there, a memory came to mind. Luna had taken him here one night, her notebook in hand, her eyes full of possibilities. She had discussed painting the tree, capturing the way its branches reached toward the sky like outstretched arms of hope. Will had laughed, mocking her for her artsy nonsense. But now he wished he could take it back, to view the world from her perspective. Bill, too, felt himself drawn back to the oak tree, motivated by an unknown urge. He and Will first met in the shadow of its branches. The air between them was filled with unsaid accusations, sadness, and guilt. Bill's voice was low, shaking with wrath and grief. "If you did not do it, who did?" he demanded, his hands clenched at his sides. Will stared at him with sad eyes and whispered, "Bill, I loved her. I loved her more than anything." For a few moments, the two men stood together, united by their common grief and inability to make sense of a world without Luna. When the truth was revealed, it did not match anyone's expectations. A hiker passed through the woods weeks later and discovered a backpack half buried in the mud. Inside found a journal with wet but legible pages, as well as the locket Luna had always worn. The notebook belonged to a vagabond named Ethan, who had briefly worked at Luna's art gallery. His postings were wild and obsessive, with sketches of Luna and rants about her light. The authorities apprehended him in a neighboring state, and he confessed under pressure. He had pursued Luna that night, propelled by the belief that she belonged to him. When she rejected him, his obsession escalated to violence. The confession should have provided closure, but it did not. For Will, it was a hollow win, proving his innocence but not his salvation. The town's whispers subsided, but they never ceased. He fled Crestwood, unable to bear the weight of its memories, and began anew in a city where no one recognized his name. Bill, too, left, carrying Luna's portrait and the anguish of her absence with him. The oak tree stood firm, its limbs still stretching for the sky, a silent witness to a story with no happy ending. In the end, Luna's death remained a wound that never fully healed. It lingered in the spaces between sentences, in the quiet times when Will or Bill reflected on her grin, laugh, and the way she made the world seem brighter. They took her with them not as a ghost, but as a reminder of the cost of love and how, even in its absence, it alters the lives of those it touches. Luna had been both daring and beautiful, and her light, now gone, left echoes that no man could escape. "No, I didn't kill her," Will exclaimed as the cold steel shackles clasped around his wrists. His voice shook, shaking with dread and wrath as 2 officers took him to the waiting car. The night was filled with flashing lights, blue and red strobes painting the damaged pavement in colors that mocked his sorrow. Luna's body lay covered a few feet away, with the thin white sheet doing little to conceal the fact that her life had ended. Bill sat in the corner of the little living room, his big shoulders quivering and tears silently flowing down his cheeks. The youngster was too small to bear the weight of the night, but there he was, broken in the corner of the world he had once thought safe. The neighbors crowded outside, muttering, some hugging their robes tighter, while others held their phones up to record the catastrophe. No one came up to speak for Will. He was a man who had always walked alone, using his pride as armor and his silence as a shield. But now, in the shadow of accusation, quiet became a weapon aimed at his heart. Will placed his face against the glass, his gaze drawn back to Luna's lifeless figure. Memories flashed in his thoughts, too rapid to stop and too keen to ignore. Her gentle, melodious laugh filled the lonely corners of his flat. Her hand, little and warm, fit nicely in his. She gazed at him as she talked about dreams, and her voice carried a type of faith he hadn't known before then. And now gone, torn away in a night of chaos that no words could describe. Bill's cries echoed across the air, faint but penetrating. They appeared to echo inside Will's chest, slicing him apart. He wanted to shout again, telling the world, the authorities and Luna herself, "I did not kill her. I could never hurt her." His throat clenched, and the sound died before it could be heard. The station's walls smelt of damp concrete and old sadness. They shoved Will into a chair, the cuffs cutting into his skin, leaving furious red lines as proof of guilt. An officer slapped a file onto the table, spreading papers and flashing images before his eyes. Luna is smiling. Luna was giggling. Luna died. Each photograph pierced deeper, twisting the dagger of loss. "Tell us what happened," one cop urged, leaning in. His voice was not unkind, but it bore the weight of suspicion, as if the truth had already been written and Will was only there to read it. Will gulped hard. His lips trembled when he spoke. "I did not kill her. I loved her. She was my everything," he said, his voice cracking and his chest rising and falling quickly. "You have to believe me." But belief was not readily given in that room. They wanted answers which Will did not have. He had bits of recollection that wouldn't align. The night began with laughing, with wine poured into broken glasses, and Luna lying on his shoulder as they discussed the future. But it ended with blood, Bill screaming and sirens tearing the night apart. Bill. The thought of him struck Will like lightning. The youngster had seen and felt too much. He wasn't Will's child but Luna's younger sibling, whom she had promised to safeguard. When his parents died, Luna became everything to him. Mother, sister, guardian, and hope. Bill sat in that corner broken, for his world had been crushed yet again. Back in the interrogation room, Will's quiet was interpreted as guilt. Hours passed into something timeless, a painful eternity in which every tick of the clock sounded like a hammer on his casket. He replayed every detail of that night, trying to figure out what he had missed and why Luna had died. But recollection failed him. All he could feel was the warmth of her final grin and the sound of her last breath, which he couldn't recall hearing leave her. He eventually collapsed in his chair from tiredness. Luna appeared in his nightmares, her face gleaming with the gentleness that he cherished. She murmured, "Find out the truth, Will. Don't let me fade into lies." He reached for her, but she went through his fingers like mist, leaving him cold and empty. When daybreak arrived, the world outside resumed as if nothing had occurred. Children strolled to school, buses rumbled down the street, and the sun rose like it always did. But for Will and Bill, time had stopped. Luna was gone. Bill declined to communicate with the police. His red and puffy eyes told stories that words alone could not. He clutched a blanket that smelled strongly of Luna's perfume, burying his face in it whenever someone asked him a question. The boy's silence served as both a protective screen and a wound. Days went into weeks. Will sat in his cage, counting the cracks in the ceiling, each with a scar that resembled his own. Lawyers came and left, discussing plea bargains and trials. But Will held on to one truth. He had not killed Luna. He couldn't admit guilt to a crime that ripped his soul apart. The outside world judged him differently. The news headlines portrayed him as a jealous lover, a guy overwhelmed by fury, and a tragic character who had devastated the lady he professed to love. Strangers spat his name out of disdain. Old friends disappeared, refusing to be connected with his shadow. And Bill? The youngster was left in the hands of family members he scarcely knew. His eyes were dull, and his laughter was muted. He created pictures with crayons, but each one was of Luna. She was smiling, crying, and standing alone in a field of gray. In each drawing, however, she was out of reach. Will's trial happened months later. The courtroom was full, and the air was thick with the scent of inquiry and judgment. The prosecutor portrayed him as a monster, a man with buried rage who snapped. They talked about bruises discovered, conflicts overheard, and neighbors who claimed they heard Luna weep. Each word was like another stone on his chest. But Will also spoke, his voice rough with anguish. He spoke of love, of times that no one else had witnessed. He talked of Luna's goals of traveling the world, her commitment to always protect Bill, and the nights they spent together chatting about nothing and everything. He swore repeatedly, "I didn't kill her. I loved her more than my own life." The jurors listened. But in the end, truth was insufficient to save him. Evidence outweighed love, and suspicion outweighed remembrance. Will was found guilty. The word struck him harder than any punch. Guilty. As if he had chosen this. As if his hands had accomplished what his heart could never comprehend. As he was led away, he noticed Bill in the crowd. The boy's face was pale, and his small hands gripped the railing so hard that his knuckles turned white. Will saw both forgiveness and grief in their eyes as they met silently. Bill didn't believe he'd killed Luna, but the rest of the world did, and the truth was heavier than shackles. Will stayed in a cell for years, surrounded by walls that smelled of rust and remorse. He wrote letters to Bill, but he never knew if he received them. Each letter contained anecdotes about Luna, ensuring that her memory would never fade. He wrote of how she grinned when she read her favorite books, how she danced even when no music was playing, and how she brightened the world simply by being present. Bill got older with scars that no one could see. He never talked about that night or drew sketches again. But in his heart, he had two truths. Luna had adored him and Will had not killed her. The world might have condemned Will, but Bill clung to that fragile notion, the final gift Luna had given him. And thus the years passed, with pain woven through every thread. A man condemned for love he couldn't prove, a boy growing up with ghosts for companions, and a woman remembered in every silence, tear and heartbeat that wished for her return. In the end there were no answers, just pain. There is no justice, just loss. No peace, only the sound of Will's final cry as the shackles tightened around him. "No, I didn't kill her." In the solitude of his cage, Will could hear Luna's voice as if she were still alive, calling his name in that kind manner she had. He'd close his eyes and let it wash over him, the illusion so intense that he nearly thought he could turn around and find her standing there, smiling, her hair flowing across her face. But every time he opened his eyes, all he saw was the hard concrete wall, the endless gray that had replaced the hues of his universe. He often recalled the first time he met her. It had been raining all day, the kind of rain that turned the world into a watercolor masterpiece. Will had been sitting on the steps of an old bookstore, waiting for the storm to clear. Luna raced up, hugging her purse to her chest, her hair sweaty and flushed from racing. She giggled, shook the water from her sleeves, and asked if she might sit next to him. Something about her voice pierced through the rain, something bright and vibrant. From that point forward, she was no longer a stranger, but rather a beacon of light amid the darkness he had never idea existed. Luna adored simple things. She enjoyed feeding stray cats in the alley behind their building. She enjoyed painting, but she never thought her work was good enough to show others. She enjoyed humming gently while cooking, as if the world required a soundtrack that she alone could supply. And she loved Bill more than anything else, constantly putting his needs ahead of her own, and ensuring that he never felt the emptiness left by their parents' deaths. Will often remembered how she had once told him, "If I can make the people I love feel safe, then I've done enough in this world." He had smiled at her at the time, not realizing that those words would haunt him one day, since she had not been safe.